the snow bench and the king who knelt. The wind didn't just bite, it punished, it slid under torn fabric and into bone like it had a personal grudge. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets, turning the street into a white tunnel where lanterns looked like fading stars. Quinn sat on a broken carriage-top bench, her back pressed to rusted iron, her arms locked around two tiny bundles, her newborn twin daughters. Their cries were weak, like the world had already taught them not to ask for too much. Her dress had once been soft and expensive, the kind maids feared touching. Now it was thin, stained, and ripped at the hem. It clung to her like wet paper, her hair stuck to her cheeks where tears had frozen into salt lines. She couldn't even feel her fingers properly anymore. She only knew she had to keep them wrapped, keep them warm, keep them breathing. A red travel bag lay half buried beside her. It held almost nothing, a baby blanket, a cracked comb, a tiny ribbon she'd planned to tie around a cradle that no longer existed, and a folded paper. The only thing that still felt sharp in her head, Damon Thorne's words. Useless, he'd spat, his voice filling the manor hallway like smoke. Worthless, you gave me nothing but girls. Quinn had begged him not to say it that way, not in front of the servants, not in front of the midwife, not in front of the babies who had barely opened their eyes, but Damon had ripped the twins from her arms anyway, lifted them like unwanted parcels, and then thrown them back onto her chest so hard it stole her breath. Take your useless brood and get out, he'd said, and the guards, men who used to bow when she passed because she was the lady of the house, had dragged her down the steps while she was still bleeding, still shaking, still half in shock from labor. No carriage, no coin, no cloak, just snow and the night and two fragile lives pressed to her skin. Quinn had stumbled through the city like a ghost, knocking on doors that stayed closed, passing shop windows where people stared and then looked away. Nobody wanted trouble, nobody wanted a woman who looked like scandal and desperation. She had learned something in those hours, a truth colder than the storm. Kindness was a luxury, and the poor were expected to disappear quietly. Now she sat at the abandoned stop, because her legs wouldn't carry her farther, because the wind was screaming, because the twins were getting quieter, and that terrified her more than any shout. She lowered her face to the cloth, breathing into it, trying to share warmth the way mothers did in stories. Please, she whispered, please stay with me. She had named them in secret, Leora and Marin. She'd whispered the names while Damon paced outside the birthing room like a man insulted by fate. He never asked what she'd named them, he never asked if they were healthy, he only cared that they weren't sons. Leora's tiny fist curled weakly against Quinn's chest, Marin's mouth opened in a soundless cry, and Quinn felt panic flare, not loud, not dramatic, just a deep, sinking terror, the kind that made your mind go empty. I'm sorry, she said again, because mothers apologized even when they weren't guilty. I tried to be enough. Her eyelids drooped, the cold had reached that dangerous stage where it didn't hurt as much, where numbness pretended to be peace, where sleep looked gentle and merciful. She hated that her body wanted to give up. She hated that she understood why people lay down in snow and never stood again. This is how it ends, she thought, and her heart clenched around the word ends, because it wasn't just her ending, it would be theirs too. Then something changed. Not warmer, not calmer, just different. The air thickened like a storm holding its breath. The snowflakes closest to her stopped moving. Quinn stared because she was dizzy and half frozen and maybe hallucinating, but no, the flakes hovered around her in a silent ring, suspended midair as if unseen hands had pinched time itself. The wind still howled beyond that circle, but inside it, the sound dulled, like the world had been wrapped in velvet. Hoofbeats echoed down the street. They were slow and deliberate, impossibly clear through the storm, the kind of sound that made you picture a procession, not a traveler. A carriage emerged from the white curtain of snow, black lacquered wood edged with silver filigree. Its wheels glided without crunching, without slipping, as if ice respected it. It stopped in front of the bench. The door opened. Warm golden light spilled onto the snow like a promise. Quinn didn't move, she couldn't. Fear tried to rise, but her body was too tired, too empty. Even fear felt far away. She simply stared, heart thudding, waiting for a thief, a noble, a monster. Footsteps approached from the side. Slow, measured, purposeful. A figure emerged from the storm, tall, cloaked in deep emerald trimmed with silver thread that shimmered beneath the lanterns. His coat moved like wings when he walked, pale hair fell to his shoulders, not gray, not blonde, something between moonlight and frost, and his boots made no sound on the frozen ground. Then she saw his eyes. Red. Not bright like fire, but deep like garnet, glowing softly in the dark. Vampire. The word hit her like a bell. Every story mothers used to scare children into behaving, every rumor servants whispered behind curtains, the noble predators who ruled the night beyond city law. She should have screamed. She should have clutched the twins and tried to run. But he stopped a few feet away, and his gaze moved carefully from her blood-stained dress, to the bundles in her arms, to her face, and something in his expression shifted. Not hunger. Not amusement. Concern. It startled her more than the red eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm raged beyond their circle, but here, in this strange pocket of stillness, the world felt suspended. Then the vampire moved. He knelt. Quinn's breath caught because men like Damon never knelt, nobles never knelt, predators never knelt, and yet this man lowered himself into the snow like it was nothing, like it was natural, like the street was his throne room and she was someone he had chosen to address with respect. His voice was low, calm, impossibly gentle. You should not meet death tonight. Quinn stared, lips trembling. Who are you? She tried to say, but her throat scraped. The words came out as a rough whisper. Why are you here? His red gaze searched hers, not like a hunter, but like someone reading a wound. Come with me, he said. 3 words. Quiet. Steady. Unbelievable. Quinn tightened her arms around the twins, the instinct to protect flared. No, she rasped. I don't even know you. He didn't flinch, he didn't reach for her, he didn't force anything, he simply lifted his hands slowly, palms open, a gesture of restraint. Then he unclasped his cloak. The fabric slid free like liquid night, heavy, rich, lined with silver thread that caught the lantern light. He leaned forward carefully, careful not to touch her without permission, and draped it around her shoulders. Warmth hit her like a shock. Not just warmth, heat, like the cloak carried the memory of a fire that never died. Her skin prickled painfully as feeling returned. She gasped, her body trying to decide whether to cry or collapse. Why? She whispered again, tears burning as they thawed. His eyes did not leave hers. Because you carry what I have been searching for. Her mind stumbled. I don't understand. You will, he said simply. He rose, tall enough that the lantern light crowned him, and with a small tilt of his head, he gestured toward the carriage. You may choose, he said, voice still gentle but unbreakable. Freeze here and let your daughters die beside you, or trust the stranger who kneels before no one. Quinn's stomach twisted because the choice wasn't fair. It wasn't truly a choice, but she understood what he was offering: survival, warmth, safety, and she understood what she would lose if she refused. Leora and Marin were too quiet. Their cries had softened into tiny whimpers, and that terrified her more than the vampire ever could. She looked up at him. If I come, she whispered, what will you do to us? Pause. Then, honest as stone, I will keep you alive. It wasn't a romantic promise, it wasn't poetic, it wasn't even comforting, but it was real, and Quinn had learned that real mattered more than pretty words. Her legs shook as she tried to stand, the pain of childbirth flared through her hips, her knees nearly buckled, and before she fell, the vampire's hand lifted slightly, not touching, not grabbing, just hovering near her elbow, ready to steady her if she asked. That restraint felt like respect. Quinn steadied herself, teeth clenched, and took a step. Then another. The vampire moved ahead, holding the carriage door open. Inside was impossible: velvet seats, ghost blue lanterns, the scent of cedar and night-blooming flowers. Warmth wrapped around her like a blanket. She climbed inside and sank onto the cushions, clutching the twins as if the world might steal them again. The door closed softly. The carriage began to move, gliding through the storm as if the ice itself had decided to cooperate. The vampire sat across from her, keeping distance, hands folded, posture composed, like a king who had walked into a room and expected it to become quiet. Quinn's heart hammered. She tried to steady her breathing. What is your name? She whispered. He met her gaze. Arison Valen. The name carried weight like an old law. And where are you taking me? She asked, voice shaking. His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, but his eyes remained serious. Somewhere your husband will never find you, he said. Somewhere your daughters will be safe. He paused, and the lantern light made his red eyes glow softer, almost human. Somewhere you were always meant to be. Quinn swallowed because she didn't believe in fate anymore. Damon had beaten that out of her with cruelty and humiliation. But as the carriage carried her away from the bench where she had been ready to die, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hope. Not yet. But the smallest, most fragile possibility of it. Outside the storm screamed. Inside warmth breathed. And across from her sat a vampire king who had knelt in the snow. The castle of night, and the truth hidden in twin blood. The carriage traveled longer than Quinn expected, yet she never felt the jolt of cobblestone or the drag of snow. It was like the wheels floated an inch above the world, and that terrified her in a quiet way, because it meant Arison's power wasn't a rumor, it was real. She kept glancing at him, searching for a crack in his calm, a sign this was a trap, but he remained still, a respectful distance, gaze drifting only to the twins when they whimpered, not with hunger but with something close to wonder. "Why are you helping me?" Quinn asked again after a long silence. "Because her fear needed an enemy, and if it couldn't find one, it would eat her alive." Arison's eyes flicked to her face. "In your world," he said, "a woman is punished for birthing daughters." Quinn flinched. "In mine," he continued, "a mother who survives the storm for her children is rare." "That's not an answer," she whispered. "It is," he replied quietly, "just not the one you want." The carriage slowed. Through the window, Quinn saw a gate rise out of the snow like a black ribcage, towering iron bars etched with silver symbols. Guards stood motionless, not men, not fully, their eyes glinted strange in the lantern light. The gate opened without a sound. Then the castle appeared. It wasn't a fairy tale palace, it was a fortress carved from night stone, tall spires disappearing into storm clouds, windows glowing faint blue like watchful eyes. The whole place felt alive, ancient, and aware. The carriage entered a covered courtyard, and warmth rushed in from somewhere deeper inside, as if the castle had its own heartbeat. Servants approached, not human, pale and graceful, moving with careful precision. They bowed to Arison, but their gaze lingered on Quinn with curious surprise, like she was a contradiction walking into a world that didn't expect her. Arison stepped out first and offered his hand toward the carriage doorway, palm up, not grabbing, not demanding. Quinn hesitated, then shifted the twins carefully and placed her free hand in his. His skin was cool, not cold like the storm, more like polished marble warmed by candlelight, steady, controlled. He helped her down gently. The servants moved closer, one holding a thick fur wrap, another carrying a basin of steaming water, another presenting a cradle lined with enchanted heat stones. Quinn stiffened. "No," she said quickly, "don't take them." Arison turned slightly, his voice low but firm. "No one touches your daughters without your consent." The servants froze immediately, heads bowed. Quinn's throat tightened. She wasn't used to consent being treated like law. A woman with silver hair and eyes like dark honey stepped forward and bowed deeply to Arison. "My king," she said, "the healer is ready." Arison's gaze never left Quinn. "Bring the healer here," he ordered. "She will not be separated from her children." The woman bowed again and vanished into the castle like mist. Quinn stood in the courtyard, clutching the twins, overwhelmed by warmth and luxury that felt unreal after the street bench. She expected mockery, judgment, disgust, but instead she felt something stranger. Attention. Respectful, cautious attention. Arison guided her inside, through halls lit by blue flame lamps, walls carved with murals of moons and battles, and at every turn vampires bowed not to her but to him, yet their eyes kept flicking toward the twins. Not hungry. Curious. Almost reverent. They reached a chamber filled with gentle heat. The air smelled of herbs and clean linen. A healer waited, an older vampire with kind eyes and careful hands. Quinn braced herself for pain, for cold tools, for humiliation like the midwife at Damon's estate who had been forced to bow and apologize for failing her lord. But the healer simply nodded. "You've lost too much blood," she said softly, "and you've carried too much shame that isn't yours." Quinn blinked hard. As the healer examined her with gentle professionalism, Arison remained near the door, not staring, not intruding, but present like a wall between her and harm. When the healer lifted the twins' blankets to check them, Quinn's arms tightened instinctively. The healer paused immediately and looked to Quinn. "May I?" she asked. Quinn hesitated, then nodded. Leora's tiny chest rose and fell shallowly. Marin's lips were bluish from cold. The healer frowned and pressed her fingers lightly over their foreheads, whispering a word in an ancient language that made the air shimmer. Warmth spread through the twins, not sudden, not shocking, but steady like sunrise. Their cries strengthened, their faces pinked slightly. Quinn's eyes filled again, but this time the tears were different, not frozen despair, but relief so strong it hurt. "They will live," the healer said. Quinn sagged, nearly collapsing, and before she could fall, Arison stepped forward and steadied her by the elbow, still careful, still controlled. Quinn whispered, "Thank you." Arison's eyes softened a fraction. "You did not abandon them," he said. "That is why they will live." When the healer finished, she bowed to Arison. "My king," she said, voice low, "the twins' blood, it carries a mark." Quinn stiffened, fear returning. "What mark?" The healer looked hesitant, then spoke anyway. "The Moonbound Crest." Silence. The room changed like the castle itself leaned in. Arison's jaw tightened, his gaze snapping to the twins with sharp intensity. Quinn's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" she demanded, voice shaking. Arison didn't answer immediately, as if weighing how much truth to give a woman still bleeding from betrayal. Finally he said, "It means your daughters are not ordinary." Quinn laughed bitterly. "They're babies." "They are heirs," the healer whispered. Quinn's breath caught. Heirs to what? Arison's voice lowered, deadly calm, to a lineage that was supposed to be extinct. Quinn backed a step, clutching the twins tighter. "I don't understand. I'm human, I?" Arison looked directly at her. "Tell me about your mother," he said. "Your real mother, not the one who raised you, the one who birthed you." Quinn froze because Damon had used that question like a weapon. "You're lowborn," he'd sneered. "No one even knows where you came from." Quinn swallowed. "I was found," she admitted, "in winter at a church door. The nun said there was a silver pendant around my neck, and a note with no name, just a symbol." Arison's eyes narrowed. "What symbol?" Quinn hesitated, then reached into her dress, fingers shaking, and pulled out a small pendant on a chain, tarnished silver, shaped like a crescent wrapped around a star. The moment Arison saw it, his stillness shattered. He stepped closer, not threatening but urgent. The healer inhaled sharply. Arison's voice dropped to a whisper that sounded like awe and anger mixed. "This is the Moonbound seal." Quinn's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means," Arison said, and for the first time his control cracked, revealing something raw underneath, "you were never meant to belong to a man like Damon Thorne." Quinn's eyes burned. "Then why did I end up there?" Arison's gaze hardened. "Because someone wanted the Moonbound line hidden," he said. "Because if your daughters exist, the balance of my realm changes." Quinn shook her head. "I don't want power, I just want them safe." Arison's eyes flicked to the twins and softened again. "Then you and I want the same thing," he said. A servant burst into the chamber, pale, trembling, and bowed low. "My king," he said, "a messenger from the human city. Damon Thorne has reported his wife is stolen by monsters. He is gathering hunters." Quinn's blood turned to ice. "Hunters," she whispered, remembering stories of men who killed anything different and called it holy. Arison's expression turned terrifyingly calm. "Let him gather them," he said. Quinn stared, panic rising. "They'll come here, they'll kill?" "They will die trying," Arison said, not boasting, simply stating a fact. Quinn shook because she didn't want anyone to die, she just wanted the cruelty to stop. Arison looked at her and his voice softened again. "In my world," he said, "you do not pay for survival with your dignity." He turned to the healer. "Prepare her chambers," he ordered, "next to mine, guarded and warm." Quinn's eyes widened. "Next to yours." Arison held her gaze, steady and serious. "No one touches you," he said. "No one threatens you, not while you are under my roof." Quinn didn't know how to accept protection without feeling like it came with a price. Damon's love had always been transactional, every kindness a chain. So she asked the only question that mattered. "And what do you want in return?" Arison's eyes lingered on the twins, then returned to her. "The truth," he said, "about why fate placed you on that bench when my carriage passed." Quinn's breath trembled. Because deep down, beneath fear and grief, another feeling had begun to grow. A strange sense that the storm hadn't brought a monster to her. It had brought a king. And kings didn't kneel for nothing. The husband's lie, the hunter's trap, and the kindness that broke a curse. Damon didn't come alone. He came with a story. In the human city, he stood in the market square with his cloak thrown dramatically over his shoulders, eyes wet with fake sorrow, telling everyone his wife had been stolen by devils, that he was a grieving husband, a righteous man, and his poor daughters had been taken too. He didn't mention he'd thrown them into snow. He didn't mention he'd screamed worthless at a woman still bleeding. He didn't mention that his own servants had watched him do it. Men loved a villain they could hunt, especially when it made them feel like heroes. Hunters gathered, priests muttered blessings, mercenaries sharpened blades. Damon paid them with stolen coin and righteous fury. Quinn, meanwhile, tried to learn how to breathe in a place that didn't spit on her. Her chambers were warm, soft, filled with cradles and clean linen. Leora and Marin slept better each day, their cheeks turning rosy, their tiny fingers grasping at the world like they intended to stay. But Quinn couldn't sleep. Every creak in the hall made her flinch. Every shadow reminded her that kindness could be temporary. Arison visited once a night, never intruding, always pausing at the doorway as if asking permission with his posture alone. He spoke to the twins in a low voice, words Quinn didn't understand, but the babies calmed when he did, as if recognizing a song older than fear. One night, Quinn finally asked, "Why do they respond to you like that?" Arison's gaze stayed on the twins. "Because their blood hears mine," he admitted. Quinn stiffened. "So you're their father?" Arison's eyes snapped to hers, sharp and almost offended. "No," he said firmly, I would never take what isn't freely given. Quinn's breath caught, because that statement carried more honor than Damon had shown her in years. Then what? She whispered. Arison's jaw tightened. There was a queen once, he said, a vampire queen who believed humans and vampires could share a future without chains. She carried the Moonbound Crest. She vanished before the war ended, and with her, the line disappeared. Quinn swallowed. You think I'm connected to her? Arison's voice lowered. I know you are, he said. Your pendant is proof, your daughters are proof. Quinn's hands shook. I don't want to be proof, I want to be a mother. Arison's gaze softened. Then be one, he said simply, and let me do what kings are supposed to do, protect what the world would destroy. The hunters arrived at the castle gates at dawn. Not with courage, with arrogance. They carried silver chains, blessed stakes, bottles of oil, and banners declaring purity. Damon rode at the front, acting like a man on a holy mission. Arison watched from the battlements, expression unreadable, while Quinn stood behind him, clutching the twins, heart pounding so hard she thought she'd faint. Damon shouted up, Give me my wife, he cried, give me my children, you monsters. Quinn's stomach twisted because even now, he called them his as if she was property, as if her body had been an incubator for his pride. Arison spoke calmly, his voice carrying across the courtyard like a winter bell. She is not your wife. Damon sneered, she belongs to me. Arison's eyes narrowed, and the air itself seemed to darken. No, Arison said, she belongs to herself. That sentence hit Quinn like a blade of light. Belongs to herself. She didn't realize how badly she needed to hear it until it was spoken by someone powerful enough to make it law. Damon's face twisted. She is nothing, he spat, a low-born nobody who failed her duty. Quinn flinched, shame trying to crawl back into her skin, but then Arison turned slightly, just enough that Quinn could see his profile, and his voice dropped into something deadly. You will not speak of her that way again. The hunters laughed because men who had never been truly afraid always laughed first. They raised their weapons. And then a sound rolled out from the castle, not a roar, not a scream, but a deep pulse, like a drumbeat from the earth. The hunters froze. Their horses reared. Damon's eyes widened. From the courtyard shadows, vampires emerged, hundreds, silent, armored, eyes glowing like embers. They didn't charge, they didn't threaten, they simply stood, a wall of night. Damon's bravado cracked, but he pushed forward anyway because pride is louder than survival. Burn it, he shouted, burn them all. A priest lifted a torch. Quinn stepped forward before she could stop herself. Stop, she screamed, voice raw. Stop, you're going to kill my babies. Damon looked up and for the first time he saw the twins, alive, warm, wrapped in velvet, and something ugly flashed across his face. Not relief. Greed. If the babies lived, his lie looked worse. If the babies lived, the city might ask why he'd thrown them out. So he shouted louder, she's bewitched, don't listen, kill them before they curse us. Quinn's blood went cold. Arison's hand lifted, stopping his army with a single motion. Then he did something Quinn didn't expect. He opened the gate. A gasp spread through both sides. Quinn stared at him. Arison, no? Arison's voice was calm. They came for a monster, he said. Let them see what a king looks like. He walked out alone, cloak flowing, eyes glowing, and the hunters stumbled back despite themselves. Arison stopped a few feet from Damon, and the snow around his boots melted into steam. You threw her into the storm, Arison said quietly. Damon sneered, she failed me. Arison's gaze sharpened. She survived you, he corrected. That is not failure. Damon lifted his chin. Give her back, he demanded. Arison tilted his head slightly, almost curious. Why? He asked. So you can finish what the storm started. Damon's eyes darted. He realized he was losing control, so he reached for his last weapon. Public sympathy. He turned to the hunters, to the priests, to the watching crowd and shouted, She's my lawful wife by the gods, by the city, she belongs to my house. Quinn's knees shook. Old Fear whispered, he's right, the law will side with him, it always does. Then Arison's voice rose, not loud but absolute. In this realm, he said, a bond formed by cruelty is not a bond, it is a cage. He turned his gaze to Quinn, still standing behind the gate with the twins. Quinn, he said, using her name like a vow, do you wish to return to him? The courtyard held its breath. Quinn's mouth opened, but her voice trembled, years of being trained to obey tried to pull her backward. Then Leora made a tiny sound, a soft baby sigh, and Marin's fingers wrapped around Quinn's thumb. That small grip steadied her like an anchor. Quinn lifted her chin. No, she said, voice shaking but clear, I do not. Damon's face twisted. You ungrateful? Arison's eyes flashed. And Damon's voice died. Not because Arison attacked him, but because the ground beneath Damon's feet cracked with a thin line of blue light, a warning, a boundary. Arison looked to the hunters. Leave, he said, or be remembered as men who tried to steal newborns from their mother's arms. Some hunters hesitated. Some lowered their weapons. Because even in a world filled with hate, there are always a few people who recognize a line they should not cross. Damon screamed, Cowards, you'll let monsters rule you. A hunter at the front, older, scarred, stepped forward, eyes narrowed. Monsters, he muttered, glancing at Damon. I saw monsters in your eyes when you talked about those babies. Damon froze. The hunter turned his weapon slightly, not toward Arison. Toward Damon. Instant karma doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it comes with people finally seeing the truth. Quinn's breath caught. Arison's voice dropped. The storm did not create your cruelty, Damon Thorne, he said. It only revealed it. Damon's mouth opened, and in that second, Quinn realized something powerful. Arison didn't need to kill Damon to defeat him. He just needed to strip away the lie. And the truth was sharper than any blade. The moonbound choice, the court's cruelty, and the slow fire of love. The castle didn't become peaceful after Damon left. It became political. Vampire courts were not kind places. They were elegant, ancient, and ruthless in the quietest ways. They smiled while measuring your worth. They bowed while planning your downfall. And Quinn was a human in the king's private wing. That alone made her dangerous. The nobles came in silk and jewels, eyes glowing faintly with restrained hunger. They spoke sweetly to Arison and looked at Quinn like she was mud on a royal carpet. One lady, tall and pale, with lips red as wine, smiled at Quinn and said, How charming, our king adopts strays now. Quinn's cheeks burned, but she stayed quiet, because she'd learned survival sometimes meant silence. Arison did not stay quiet. Mind your tongue, he said softly, and the lady's smile faltered, because even soft words from a king can carry a threat. Still the whispers continued. Human. Weak. Bait. A risk. And then the most dangerous whisper of all. Moonbound. Because the Moonbound Crest wasn't just a legend, it was a claim, and claims threatened thrones. Quinn tried to disappear into motherhood. She spent her days with the twins, learning the castle's rhythms, learning to trust that food would appear, that warmth would remain, that she didn't have to beg. But at night when the twins slept, the fear returned. Arison, she whispered one evening when he visited, I don't belong here. Arison's gaze lifted from the cradle. You belong where you are safe. And what if the court decides I'm not? She asked, voice trembling. Arison's eyes narrowed. Then the court will learn what happens when it threatens what is under my protection. Quinn swallowed. You keep saying protection, but why does it feel like you're protecting me, not just the twins? Silence stretched. Arison's jaw tightened as if he hated the honesty rising in his own chest. Finally he said, Because you remind me of something this world forgot. Quinn's breath caught. What? Arison's voice lowered. That strength can be gentle, he said, and still be strength. The words landed like warmth. Not a confession of love. Not yet. But something like respect becoming attachment, attachment becoming something neither of them knew how to name. Then the court forced a trial. Not a trial of law, a trial of tradition, a ceremony where the nobles gathered and demanded the twins be tested, to prove whether they truly carried the Moonbound Crest. Quinn's blood went cold. No, she said, clutching the babies, they are not objects. A nobleman sneered, they are heirs, they are weapons, they are threats. Arison's voice turned to ice, they are infants. The nobles insisted anyway because courts don't care about feelings, they care about power. Quinn stood in the ceremonial hall, surrounded by vampires who looked at her daughters like a future they wanted to control. The healer lifted a silver bowl filled with moonlit water. If the twins carry the crest, she said, the water will glow. Quinn's arms tightened. Arison stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence like a shield. He spoke low only for her. I will not let them be harmed. Quinn's voice shook. And if they glow, what happens? Arison's eyes flashed. Then the court will demand a queen, he admitted. Quinn froze. A queen. Not you, Arison said quickly, then paused as if realizing the lie in that, because the court would want a queen, and the twins' mother would always be part of that equation. Quinn whispered, I never asked for this. Arison's gaze softened. Neither did I, he said, but fate doesn't ask, it only arrives. The healer dipped her fingers, touched the twins' foreheads one by one. The water in the bowl shimmered. Then it glowed blue-white, bright enough to light the hall. A gasp swept through the nobles. Some looked thrilled. Some looked terrified. Quinn felt her knees shake. Arison's posture changed, something ancient waking in him, not romance, not tenderness, but kingship. The High Lord of the court stepped forward, eyes sharp. The moonbound line lives, he declared. The king must bind it to the throne. Quinn's throat tightened. Bind? She whispered, remembering chains. Arison's voice cut through the hall. No one binds her, he said. The High Lord lifted a brow. Then you deny tradition. Arison's eyes burned. I deny cruelty, he replied. Tradition that treats mothers as tools will end under my reign. The hall erupted in murmurs. Quinn stared at Arison, heart pounding, because he was making enemies for her, for the twins, for a human woman the court believed was beneath them. That wasn't just strategy. That was choice. Later that night, Quinn found Arison alone on a balcony, staring at the moon through drifting snow. He didn't turn when she approached, but his voice came soft. You heard them, he said. Quinn hugged her arms around herself. They want to use my daughters. Arison's jaw tightened. They want to control the future. Quinn's voice broke. I'm tired of being controlled. Arison turned then, and in his red eyes, Quinn saw something she hadn't expected. Guilt. I have ruled for centuries, he said quietly, and I have been feared more than I have been understood, but tonight, I realized I don't want a realm built on fear. Quinn swallowed. Arison stepped closer, not touching, always that restraint. Quinn, he said, voice low, I cannot promise you an easy life here. Quinn whispered, I don't need easy, I need safe. Arison's gaze softened like the moonlight itself. Then stay, he said, not as a prisoner, not as a symbol, but as yourself. Quinn's chest tightened. She wanted to trust him. She wanted to believe a king could protect without owning. But she had been broken by a man who claimed love while delivering cruelty. So she asked the hardest question. If I stay, she whispered, will you ever ask me to repay you? Arison's expression turned solemn. I will ask you to live, he said, to heal, to raise your daughters with dignity, to stop apologizing for surviving. Quinn's eyes filled. And for the first time, she let herself imagine something dangerous. The future. Damon didn't accept defeat. Men like him never did. If he couldn't take Quinn back as property, he would try to destroy her as revenge. He returned with a larger force, not just hunters but nobles from the human city, officials who owed him favors, men who valued order over justice. They marched to the castle with papers stamped in wax, declaring Quinn a runaway wife and her children stolen heirs. Quinn read those words and felt sick. Stolen. As if a mother couldn't own her own life. Arison stood beside her, calm and unshaken. Human laws do not reach my gates, he said. Quinn whispered, but people believe him. Arison's eyes narrowed. Then we will show them truth. Truth required witnesses. Arison did something no vampire king had done in centuries. He opened the castle courtyard to the human city, invited neutral elders, merchants, even priests, not as enemies but as observers. He invited Damon too. Damon arrived dressed like a saint, eyes shining with false tears, and when he saw Quinn holding the twins, alive and warm, his face tightened with rage for a second before he masked it. My wife, he cried, you've been bewitched, come home. Quinn's stomach churned. She stepped forward anyway, heart pounding, voice shaking. No, she said clearly, I was not bewitched, I was abandoned. Damon's face twisted. Lies? Arison lifted a hand. And a servant brought out Damon's own former head maid, a woman who had served the Thorn House for 20 years, trembling but determined. She bowed to the crowd and spoke, voice shaking but loud enough. I saw him throw her out, she said. I saw him order the guards to drag her into the snow. I saw him call the babies worthless. Gasps rippled. Damon's eyes widened. You traitor? Another servant stepped forward. Then another. The midwife. The stable boy. A kitchen cook. People Damon had never considered human enough to matter. One by one they testified. Truth piled up like stones. Damon's story cracked. His authority crumbled. Quinn's breath shook because she realized something. Justice didn't come only from power. It came from people choosing to speak. Damon's face went pale, he lunged forward, furious, and in that moment his mask dropped fully. You ruined me, he snarled at Quinn. You were nothing until you crawled into a monster's bed. Silence fell like a slap. Quinn flinched. Arison's posture turned lethal. But Quinn lifted her chin. You're wrong, she said, voice trembling but firm. I was never nothing, you just needed me to believe I was so you could feel like a king. Damon's mouth opened. Quinn continued, a real king kneels to save lives, she said. A fake one throws newborns into snow. The crowd murmured. Damon looked around, realizing the faces were changing. People who once feared him now looked disgusted. Instant karma. Not lightning. Not blood. Just the truth finally landing. The human officials tried to salvage their pride. Even if he was cruel, one argued, the children's lineage matters, the city must claim them. Arison's eyes narrowed. Then the healer stepped forward, holding an old book bound in black leather. The lineage does matter, she said, but not for the city. She opened the book to an ancient crest. A crescent wrapped around a star. Quinn's pendant symbol. The healer raised her voice. The moonbound queen did not die, she declared. She fled, and she hid her blood among humans to protect it from vampire war. Quinn's breath caught. The healer looked directly at Quinn. She was your mother, she said gently. Quinn's knees nearly buckled. Her mother. A queen. Not of humans. Not of vampires. But of a line meant to unite them. Quinn clutched the twins tighter, tears spilling, because her whole life she'd been treated like low-born trash, and now she was being told she came from a woman powerful enough to rewrite history. Arison's gaze softened, and for the first time, he looked at Quinn like she wasn't just under his protection. He looked at her like she was his equal. The High Lord of the Vampire Court stepped forward, voice sharp. Then by tradition, the mother must. Arison cut him off. Tradition ends today, he said. The High Lord sneered. You would throw away centuries for a human. Arison's voice became a vow. I would throw away cruelty for a future, he said. He turned to Quinn and the entire courtyard held its breath. Quinn, he said, I will not cage you with a crown, I will not claim you with force, but I will ask you one thing, choose not for politics, not for revenge, but for the life you want. Quinn's heart pounded. The twins stirred, warm and safe in her arms. Quinn looked at the crowd, at Damon's hatred, at the vampire's hunger for power, at the humans' fear of what they didn't understand. Then she looked at Arison. A king who knelt. A man who never touched without permission. A protector who didn't demand payment. Quinn inhaled shakily. I choose my daughters, she said. Arison nodded once as if that was the only correct answer. And, Quinn continued, voice steadier, I choose a world where no mother is punished for birthing girls, where no woman is called worthless because someone else wanted a different child. The crowd went quiet. Quinn lifted her chin. I will not return to Damon, she said, and I will not be anyone's property again. Damon lunged, screaming, but human guards, the same men he thought he owned, stepped in and restrained him because even they could see now. He wasn't a wronged husband. He was a cruel man exposed. Arison stepped beside Quinn, not in front of her, beside her, like a partner, not a shield. He spoke to the crowd. Let it be known, he said, the twins Leora and Marin are under royal protection. Their mother is honored, not owned, anyone who harms them will answer to me. Then he lowered his voice only for Quinn, so soft it felt like a secret. You are free here, he said. Quinn's eyes filled again. Freedom. It sounded unreal. But when she looked down at her daughters, alive and pink-cheeked and breathing, she knew one thing. The storm had tried to erase them. And kindness, resilience, and a king who chose respect had brought them back. The moral wasn't complicated. Quinn had learned it the hard way. Never judge someone's worth by what they can give you, never measure love by control, and never underestimate a gentle heart, because sometimes the gentlest people survive the cruelest storms, and their survival becomes the beginning of a new world.